Now this all works as long as the people don't want to see the money. So if all the depositors show up at the bank one day and want the money, that's like in Britain, what is called Irish, no, it's a rock, what is it called, the bank? Anyway, banks collapse, right? The bank doesn't have the money, of course, in the vault. It doesn't have to by law, it doesn't have to have it. Then it gets bailed out and so on, as you know, so things can continue. The other problem is when the loans default. So let's say as a bank I get $100 in deposit, I lend out 90, but for some reason I don't get back those 90 because that person defaults on the loan, and then a year later the person walks in and wants $100 back, I don't have it. So banks, of course, depend massively on people serving their debts or making their payments or paying their debts back, right? Now if that doesn't happen and a bank doesn't get its debts back, then this cascades, right? Because you promised as a bank all these other payments to all these other banks every day, and if you can't make those payments, it can just cascade. So that's a really big problem. Now, defaults need to occur on a finite planet because the economy cannot go forever. That's the key to understand. We reach this point at some point. With this currency system, monetary system, you have to reach this point at some point. Whether it's now or in 100 years from now, this must happen. Okay? So then the other question is this M0 in this formula. That's the money that for the first time is in circulation. Where on earth does this money come from? You have to ask yourself. Well, let's take the most famous and most important example, which I can speak to. That's the United States, right? That's the world's reserve currency. Let's talk about that one because that's the most important one. Everything else is like peanuts, right? Euros maybe there, but it's really nothing. So it's all noise. The US dollar is like 60-some% of the world's reserve currency. Let's talk about that. If you talk about Federal Reserve, this is an amazing feat that some bankers came up with because they call this thing Federal Reserve. It's a central bank. They call it federal. It turns out it's not federal. They call it reserve. It turns out it has no reserves. It's an ultimate feat in human history. It really is. So this is what it is. It's a private bank. The US central bank is a private bank. Okay? The shares are held mainly by US and UK commercial banks and other entities. There's also private people and so on, but the bulk of it, the shares, are being held by US and UK banks. This is so crazy because the Federal Reserve also lends money to these banks. And if the US Federal Reserve, for instance, lends money to the US Treasury, they do that interest, of course. The American people have to pay income tax to serve these interest payments. The interest payments partially go back to the shareholders, of course. But in the process, the banks are being used themselves to make it all work. So, beautiful system, right? If you're a shareholder, you're done. This is the ultimate fix. Like, you don't do nothing. You always win. And it's the authority that can create money out of thin air. This is honest. This is the truth. So, you might have seen the headline about 6 months ago or so. It said that the Federal Reserve has become the largest creditor now of the US government. First of all, I thought, what does that even mean? I don't understand. Well, what it means is typically, say you're in the White House and you have to borrow $1 trillion for the fiscal year, let's say, right? We have these numbers now, yeah? And you're the president. Then you ask yourself, where do I get $1 trillion from? So, one traditional way of doing this are bonds. Okay, so you sit in your office and you say to someone in China, I need $1 trillion. From all the Walmart stuff that we bought and went to China, all that money, can you bring it back? Can you ship over $1 trillion this way in a container? Well, it's electronic, of course. And I write you a bond that in 10 years I pay this back with interest. Okay, this is like a pyramid scheme, of course. And this usually works, or has worked, until about 6 months ago. Because the demand for the US government is now so high that there's not enough money in circulation basically anymore to write enough bonds. Or the Chinese don't want to buy the bonds because maybe the US dollar will crash. The bottom line is that Obama has to turn to the Federal Reserve directly and say, can you lend me $1 trillion? And then the Federal Reserve says, oh, chances are yes. Otherwise everything crashes, I suppose. $1 trillion. So the way this goes is someone goes on the computer and opens a bank account saying whatever the date, and put in $1 trillion. That's the number $1 trillion. You press a button and then you just transfer this to the US Treasury Department. That's it. You just created $1 trillion out of thin air. This is how it actually works. And then through fractional reserve banking, it turns into 10 trillion. And the world's economy is, what, 60 trillion a year? So if Obama borrows $1 trillion literally out of thin air from the Federal Reserve, it turns basically into something like 10, which is a significant portion of the GDP every year. It's massive inflation. It's absolutely massive inflation. think one reason why oil is at $100 a barrel in this recession is money printing. The money has to end up somewhere. Now, the ultimate feat is this, of course, that all money is debt. If this is the mechanism, the money first and foremost comes from the Federal Reserve. The first dollar to get into circulation is from the Federal Reserve. It's being lent out of nothing into the economy. You have to understand that. Once you lend this to the US Treasury and you charge 5% interest, let's say, 2%, I don't care, then a year from now, the money you should get back is more than what you lend out. But the only mechanism to get the money out in the first place is you yourself. So the problem is, we always say, hey, we should all pay our debts as Canadian, right? We're all in debt, right? Let's pay it all off. If we all pay it off, we have no money in circulation anymore, believe it or not. This is what it is. It's crazy. This is how it works. Someone said, it's so big a lie, make it big enough, right? That's what Goebbels, right, in Germany, the propaganda minister, right? He said, just make the lie big enough, or the bull, it's not a lie, I mean, well, not the truth anyways. And people will not believe it, right? It's like, this cannot be, because that's crazy. Well, this is what it is, though. This is how the monetary system works. At least for all the countries that I know. And so these are sort of the bottom line here. There's not enough money in circulation to pay off all the debts. And a growing GDP means growing debts. And so to serve the debts, you have to increase the money supply. If you don't do that, at least you have to become more productive every year. So the money has to circulate faster at least. So if the money supply is fixed, so many dollars in circulation, the least you have to do is to serve debts is to become more productive every year. You have to circulate the money faster and faster and faster. So you have to grow the GDP. The bottom line is you have to grow the GDP. And that means grow the debts. And this is one of the amazing graphs, right? This is 1950s. This is historical reversal here. This is total debit and credit outstanding in the US. I have a couple more graphs of this. Basically, the total debts of the United States, that's private and public. You add it all up, and this is sort of, it's non-dimensionalized, it starts at 1. And then it goes to kind of like 70-fold over 50 years. You increase the money supply 70-fold. Now, have the people become 70 times as productive? Probably not. If they haven't, then that's inflation. Right? Yeah. If you don't want any inflation, you have to become 70 times as productive not to have inflation, because you have to offer 70 times the amount of products for 70 times the amount of money, right? Then you don't have any inflation. But they haven't become 70 times as productive. Productivity is growing by 2% a year, so they've become maybe 40 times as productive. So, and then the first thing that happened is here, right? This is amazing. So you see, it's always increasing. It never decreases. Not even during the oil crisis here and stuff. There's an oil crisis here, there's an oil crisis here, there's the Iraq war with Hossein Iran. It never crashed, even though we had recession. We had a recession here, recession here, recession here. It always increased because the government printed money, of course. And look at this. This is 2008 or something. Lehman Brothers. It decreases dramatically. You might say, oh, it's not that bad. But I'll show you the next slide what really happened. This is what happened. So this is, again, total debts, public and private in the US, okay, 1970s, some number, right, in terms of GDP, and it went up, of course, it was exponential. So you print money faster, or you induce money faster into the economy, increase your debts faster than the GDP grows, otherwise it should be flat, okay? And then here it sort of, actually here it kind of levels off. The amazing thing is you might say, well, for the first time it almost looks like the debt didn't increase. It's almost steady, right? But this is the combination of private and public debts. This is really what happened. So this is around 2000, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Lehman Brothers is around here. And this is actually what happened in the private sector. In the United States for the last 3 years, $1 trillion or $2 was sucked out of the economy every year. Because people couldn't pay their car loans, their houses, their foreclosures or the mortgages and all that. The banks didn't get back their money. That just disappeared. Money doesn't exist anymore. It just disappeared. The banks were all defaulted, of course. So, get this, right? So you add this up now. So this is about 2 trillion, 3, let's say 4, 5 trillion sort of around here that has been lost. And yet, right? This alone would have actually dropped down something like this far or something, right? So the gap is the money printing of the Federal Reserve. So otherwise it would be down here. So the Americans printed money like there's no tomorrow. Like, you know, it's 15 trillion now or something. When Obama took over, it was like 8 trillion or whatever. It's 7 trillion. It's almost double. It's insanity, right? Without that, it would be down here. And despite the fact they injected 5, 6, 7 trillion, we still didn't increase. So the defaults of the US economy, they were so incredibly high, we were just close to collapse, of course. That's why they print and print and print and print. Okay. Now, Spain, Canada is not Spain anyway. Canada is not immune. So if you look at this, Canadian government always wants to make us believe that we're better off than the Europeans, right? Like what these guys want. No, we're not actually. That's the problem. So if you look at, these are government debts in GDP, and these are private debts in terms of GDP. So the US, for instance, as you saw, 360 is basically 200% private, and it doesn't quite add up, it's about 280%, so that's probably 2005 or something. Okay. Canada's right there. So, and this is public debts. The federal government of Canada's public debts are something like 42% or something. We look good. The Germans are 80%, the French are 85%, the Greeks are 120 and all that stuff, and we're like, hey, well, it's 82, this is like 45 or some 42% in Canada. We look good. Well, the problem is that most of the spending in Canada occurs in the provincial level. So if you add the provincial and the municipalities and the cities, these are total public debts. You're no better off than the UK or, you know, whatever. So it's around 80 anyways. Canada doesn't look better at all. Federal public debts in Canada just as high as anywhere else. Pretty well amazing, isn't it? Federal government looks good though. Right? And then this is the private debts. Well, make up your own mind there. If we're better off or not, Sweden looks better. We're in there anyway, we're not immune, right?
So where would Greece be?
Greece, I don't know. 120. I don't know. Actually, you know what? I think private debts is probably quite low. I wouldn't be surprised. They're probably out here somewhere, past 100. But I would actually imagine, if I had to put Greece in here, I would estimate perhaps somewhere near Belgium, I'm guessing. I don't know. I think the private debts might not be that high, actually.
So what about Japan? Why does it not collapse?
Interesting. So, so the Japanese have an unbelievable amount of savings, and almost all the Japanese bonds are held by their own population, which is unbelievable. This is like the ultimate pyramid scheme, right? You approach pension in Japan, the last thing you want is your own government to collapse. Like, it's in no one's interest, you see. Like, the bondholders of the Japanese debts are the people themselves. And they were so productive all these years, an export nation, right? So they accumulated an unbelievable amount of wealth, and they bought their own bonds. And this is a really interesting case, Japan. It's mainly held by their own people. That's not the case for other nations.
And why is Australia so low? I mean, particularly with personal, because I mean, I understand Czech Republic is lower, but Australia would have a much more similar life to a lot of the other countries.
I think this is 5 or 6 years old because Australia had an incredible housing boom, right, as you might know. Like, the affordability index in Australia for housing is much worse than Canada and even Vancouver. It's up here. So I would think Australia has moved in the last 5, this is probably 2000, I should check the date, but this must be outdated. I think Australia has moved in this direction, actually. But the public debts in Australia are fairly low, that's true. I don't know Australia well enough why, but it is. But the private debts have probably gone up quite a bit through the housing, right? The mortgages, I'm saying, so it would be private debts.
So what is the Scotia capital? That's,
Sorry?
the source that you have there.
Scotia Bank?
Yeah, Scotia Bank?
Yeah, that's right. It's the investment or the economics department. Basically. Anyway, so let's move on here. So like I said before, now the amazing part of this to really understand, right, the bottom line is that the amazing thing is that the money, almost everywhere in the world, including Canada, is not backed up by anything. So when you have a $20 note in your hand or in your bank account or something, it's not backed up by anything. No one guarantees you in this world that in a year from now, you put this into the garden, right? You take it in a big hole, put it in there, and take it out 10 years later. There's absolutely no guarantee you can get anything for it. Nothing. No one guarantees you nothing here. This is the amazing thing you have to understand. And that's called fiat currency. The Latin, it means basically let it be done. Let it be money, because someone says so. That's what it's a decree, basically. Now this used to be different. It's very important. So it used to be gold standard. So you can back up the currency. If there's an alternative, you can do this actually, right? So you can make the coins out of gold or silver, for instance. It used to be done thousands of years ago. And there's your intrinsic value. The worst case is you have the coin at least. If it's a gold coin, at least you have the gold coin. And someone will, well, in human history at least, people are always willing to trade with gold for some reason. It's rare, I don't know why. I think it's another story, but people trade with gold. So if we make it from gold or silver, it has at least intrinsic value. But I figure that the loonie or the toonie is probably intrinsically worth 2 cents, I'm guessing. I'm not sure, that's probably what it is. There's no intrinsic value. And historically, even the United States has been on and off the gold standard, and has always been a battle basically between private money lenders who wanted off the gold standard so they can increase the money supply and charge money charge interest on money you don't have, and so on. Versus some smart people who like to have a gold standard. And the last time the US finally took it off the gold standard was in 1971 or so, plus or minus a year, I'm not sure. Under Richard Nixon, he did many things. People always talk about Watergate. The main thing he did was taking off the gold standard. That was a real disaster. Now, then you can print money like there's no tomorrow. Because before, it says, in God we trust on it, because you really have to. It's not worth anything. Before, you could literally take your $20 bill, it said it on it, or it said it somewhere, you could take it and get at the US Treasury, you could actually get gold for it. It was guaranteed. You could literally get gold for it, believe it or not. It would take a week or two to order, I don't know. But you could get it. Not anymore. So if you don't back it up by anything, you can print anything you want, right? Then the Federal Reserve can just print money, because they don't have to store an equivalent amount of gold in Fort Knox anymore. That's why Goldfinger went to Fort Knox. Get through with this German guy. This evil German guy went to Fort Knox to steal all the gold, because they were still on the gold standard at the time. See? And then he took it off, and it allowed them to print as much money as they wanted to finance the Vietnam War. That's at least the explanation. The amazing thing that was Henry Kissinger, he then thought, wait, if we have no guarantee of the US dollar's worth and value, how do we guarantee the value? It's a very interesting thought, isn't it? Imagine someone says, let's take it off the gold standard. And you think, we're the largest economy in the world. If anyone loses faith in us, it's over. So the way you can guarantee the value of fiat money is essentially, well, there's a few ways only. Manufacturing is one of them. See, I have a high faith in whatever currency Germany has, not because I'm German, because as long as I manufacture. The worst is, I buy a German car. You see, I can buy a German car or a German tool. So as long as the country produces something of value, at least I can purchase it with it. Right? If the country doesn't produce anything or has no goods to offer, only service industry, like Singapore or something, I would certainly not have any Singapore currency on me. I won't invest into it personally in this time. So what Henry Kissinger did was, he struck a deal with the Saudis in 1971, more or less. And the deal was, from now on, Saudis, you will trade all your oil in US dollars only. That was the deal, actually. And the Saudis said, yeah, that's okay. That's actually the deal. And the Americans at the time were still the largest oil producer in the world. And Saudi is the second biggest. Together, it's like 30–40% of the oil production. Once you trade that in US dollar, everything will be traded in US dollar, will be compatible. Since then, oil is in US dollars. And that guarantees the dollar's worth. Believe it or not. It's fun. It really is. It's amazing. Well, Kissinger was smart of us. So this is what happened. This is, again, the figures we saw before. This is total credit, public and private in the United States. This is, of course, the Great Depression, right? A lot of money printing. And then it's not too bad. Okay, not too bad. And the US was a powerhouse, of course, after the war, and exported a lot of things, and so on and so forth. And then Henry Kissinger took off the US dollar, the gold standard hit. And, you know, I mean, see what happened, right? It's exponential. It's just basically vertical at this point. And then Obama would be like, if you want to explain a vertical line to an undergrad student, it's like, when Obama took over, took vertical, you know, it's like this. So this allowed, because this happened when you take it off the gold standard, because you can print any money you want. Now, what's the other alternative? So you can put it back on the gold standard or some equivalent. Some people are in favor of it, some people are against it. For many reasons, very complicated, and I don't understand it all myself. There's another alternative which is totally amazing, actually. And this has been proposed by several people. In fact, it was done by Abraham Lincoln. You can, in the US government, in the US, for instance, this has happened in history, as a government, you have the right to create your own money. It doesn't have to be a Federal Reserve. As a government, you can do this. And that's what Lincoln did. When he had to finance the Civil War, he had no money for it. The money lenders were charging him about 20%. This is not a joke. It was credit card interest, seriously. He couldn't do it. He said, there's no way I can finance the war at 20% interest. And then one of his advisors said, well, Constitution allows you to create your own money. And that's what he did. He just, okay, here's the new money called the greenback. And I, the president, guarantee that this is good to pay taxes with it, basically. That's all you need to say. That's really all it is. And then you just pay all the soldiers. You just print it. In those days, we print, really physically print. And then here's 1,000, kill this guy from the south. And we come back and another 1,000. And you do it, right? Let's say do it, unfortunately or fortunately. And then here's the $2,000. You might say, well, now what? Well, you also made some other income. You can use it to pay taxes, you see. I accept this as taxes, and it worked, you know. That's how the Civil War was financed. Debt-free. Henry Ford said the same thing. So they built this hydro dam in Tennessee at the time, and it was financed through bonds. Okay, so you build this thing, You issue bonds, then you run this power plant, you make money of it, and you pay the bondholders. It's one way of doing it, of course. It's very typical in municipalities in this day to do it this way. Henry Ford said, how stupid is that? You're the government. You just print debt-free money and build the dam. Okay? And just say it's good to pay taxes. That's all you need to do. That's all. It comes back. And you tear it up in mid-air over the next 20 years, you haven't created any money, but the dam is there. It was Henry Ford, I'm not joking. So, that's the bottom line, last couple of slides. So, you have to understand the clash between the two. So, the current world monetary system is based on fiat currencies and fractional reserve banking, right? This inevitably increases the money supply. Unless, if it doesn't, it crashes. This is the key to understand. Okay? Debts can only be repaid with interest if the economy grows indefinitely. That's the bottom line with fiat currencies and fractional reserve banking. That can't go on from the finite planet forever. And this is what I like this quote, faith is what religion and money have in common. It really is. The faith in it. And the solution, I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, but this current system will not work forever. Now, the infinite growth paradigm is failing. It will fail ultimately. And the thing is that even if we move to so-called alternative energy technologies and recycle everything and compost it, we're like live in this paradise, basically, okay? As long as you have fiat currency system and fractional reserve banking, it will collapse. Because the economy must grow. In other words, this system doesn't allow for a steady economy. It's not possible. You can't. This is an important thing to understand. So if you want to have a constant economy that doesn't grow, doesn't shrink, and you live sustainably, you just do it every year the same, let's say we could do that, okay? Everyone's happy. Not with the system, you can't do it. It doesn't work. So, this is Michael Rupert, some of you might know him. Unless you change the money, the way money works, you change nothing. I kind of like that. And this is the last slide here. So this is the rubber band example. I like this kind of. So I thought about, you see, when I give these talks, people always ask, come on, Peter, we make progress. You're just such a pessimist. And then I always have this feeling like, yeah, we make progress, but I don't really see the outcomes here. I mean, it's, you know. And I think this is sort of, after all these talks, this is what came out of it. So I think this is us on a rubber band. This is like global population. This is, I don't know, Earth or something. And basically what's happening is you want to reach sustainability, whatever that means. You can define it yourself. And we make progress all the time. I think I actually believe that. People convinced me. We make progress all the time, actually. Relative to the rubber band. So we constantly innovate. We constantly produce some new goods and innovative ways and new technologies and all that. Yes, we make progress. But if you stretch this fast enough, you might not reach this. There's different outcomes, right? If you stretch this too fast, we will move away from sustainability, even though relative to where we are now, we make progress, you see. So in this direction, this is fossil fuel consumption pulls you away from it, climate change pulls you in this direction, fractional reserve banking pulls you in this direction, population growth pulls you in this direction, so you know all these things. Innovation gets you in this direction. And you may constantly make progress relative to where you are now on the rubber band, but you may or may not come close to sustainability. This is the key, I think. So there's three different outcomes. You might actually go further away from it. You might move closer to it, or of course what I think is the last quote here, just move the target closer. That's another one, right? I mean, you move this one closer. So that's this one here, John Stuart Mill. So I've learned to seek my happiness by limiting my desires rather than attempting to satisfy.